it's time to allow the light for pain. Step in the spotlight, grab a seat. Joy and will be soon to share. Each video crafted with care. The Jen Hardy Show, oh yeah, it's here. Soak up the sun with glitter and cheer. Shower thoughts to make you think. Champagne wishes and caviar dreams. Engage with minds both young and old, in conversations wide and bold. From life's big questions to simple joys, we're here with insights, not just noise. The Jen Hardy Show, oh yeah, it's here. Soak up the sun with glitter and cheer. Shower thoughts to make you think. Champagne wishes and caviar dreams. The Jen Hardy Show, oh yeah, it's here. Soak up the sun with glitter and cheer. Shower thoughts to make you think. Champagne wishes and caviar dreams.
Hello, everybody. Hello, I am so excited. Oh my gosh. So we had a little hiccup. I don't know what's going on with the wave thing, but we're having a situation. So Natalie will be here in just a minute. I just sent her the new link and I am sending a link to Dave so he can be my producer. And Lexa, I don't know if you're in here yet, but guys, I am so excited. So we are going to be talking to Dr. Jones. She is phenomenal. So she used to work in a prison with narcissists in the prison. Oh my goodness. She has taken a break from that because, as you can imagine, it was quite taxing. So, but she's there. And so she's going to be joining us. And while we wait for her to come back to the new link, yes, we have some interesting people, American Courts, commenting in there. All right. So here she comes. Next Monday, be sure to join me because that's funny. We're going to have a singer come on Monday, and she is phenomenal. Her name is Caitlin. She's only 19. She is opening for huge people. She's going to be number one. You're going to say you saw her win. But that is next week. And today we have Dr. Jones. I'm going to let her introduce herself because she can tell you all the phenomenal things better than I can, but she is incredible. And she just makes me so happy. All right, here she is.
Hi, Jen. How are you?
It's so good to see you. Sorry about that little hiccup there. I appreciate your patience. And do you want to tell them a little bit about you and your history? Because it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me back on. So I'm Dr. Natalie Jones. I am a licensed psychotherapist. I have been a therapist since, oh man, way back when, 2014 now. I do work with, people who are diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, as well as those who are healing from narcissistic abuse. That's what I'm known for. I have a podcast that's dedicated to those who are healing from narcissistic abuse. The podcast is called A Date with Darkness podcast, and that's been on for going on 8 years now. I do business consulting. I'm a writer. I do also expert work for the court. And so, for people that are kind of, caught up in litigation and things like that, and they need an expert, about abuse and other types of mental health things, I do that type of work as well. Coaching for narcissistic abuse, all kinds of fun stuff now.
So many things. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And Shannon just became a member. Thank you so much. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
So we've got a few people that normally come and visit. We've got American Courts, and we've got Jay, and we've got Shannon, a new channel member here to see you. And if you all have questions, please feel free to put your questions in the chat. I have so many questions. But you said something interesting earlier. You were talking about how you used to work in the facilities, right? Like in the prison or whatever. And that some of the people with issues were behind bars, but some of them were not. I don't know if you can talk about that at all, but I didn't really mention it during the podcast thing, but I thought that was something that stuck in my mind. It's I don't know if that's Yeah, can you talk about it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I definitely think, I spent a good portion of my career, about 5 years, working for corrections, and before that, working as a contractor for probation and pretrial, as well as the federal prison system. And so I think, whenever you have like administrators and you have, correctional officers and things like that that work behind prisons, those are oftentimes people that are struggling or have some of the same challenges, such as impulse control, antisocial. There's definitely a change in mentality that happens when you work in the correctional system. So, for example, once a lot of people, once they get to work, if they work in the correctional system, nobody is married. Nobody's married, and none of whatever's going on outside of prison matters, right? Everybody's sort of single, and whether they're married for 20, 30 years and they have their own family, but that's an example of one of the mentalities that happens if you um, if you are if you're looking for advancement, you're looking for leadership. There's a lot of people that want that. It becomes a very much a crabs in a bucket mentality for themselves, because you're in a male-centered facility for the most part, most of the time. I can't say for every institution. I can only speak for the institution that I have worked with. A lot of times people pander to that dynamic, right? None of the politics of the world applies to whatever you know is going on in the outside world. So discrimination policies and things like that, it doesn't usually work like that. Inside, once you're inside, it's like good old boy mentality, and they kind of run their own rules, despite whatever those little labor law posters and things like that are going on that are posted up on the wall. It's kind of like it can be pretty much a dog eat dog world in there. And it is definitely a mentality. Nobody is your friend. There are people who engage in a lot of unethical behaviors, such as sleeping with inmates. That happens quite a bit. I don't trust teachers as a result of that. We could never keep teachers in institutions. They were always getting walked off in handcuffs every week. So teachers and nurses are usually the ones with the worst boundaries. And it's not because they're the ones that are uh, they're not the ones necessarily that are acting up in the most, so to speak, in terms of like doing things that they're not supposed to, but they're the ones that they're the ones that are quick to say, I don't give a shit about my career, and I'm willing to risk it all just to have some validation. So they're usually, yeah, teachers are usually the first ones. Always, we can never keep teachers in corrections.
That is wild. So someone is saying, okay, American courts, am I a narcissist? Now I know he's kidding, but what if somebody says, am I a narcissist? How would one know if one was a narcissist?
Most people that are asking that question typically are not, because most narcissists, that I've encountered over the years, they typically think that everyone else is the problem. And if they do think that they're a narcissist, again, and I think I spoke about this on your last show, they're not quick to tell anybody about it. They're more like, I know that I am, and I'm going to keep it to myself, but I'm going to see if you, the professional, can actually tell me what I am. And if you do tell me what I am, I'm going to get pissed off, because I do feel like you've insulted me. But and then it becomes like this long, arduous process. But most people that aren't going to ask that. But I could certainly go back down the list of characteristics that one must have, or that will likely have if they are not narcissists. 5 of those 9, so that arrogance, and that attitude or their behavior, that lack of empathy, being envious of other people or feeling that people are envious of them. They're exploiting people or using people for their own personal benefit. They have no qualms about that. Again, that sense of entitlement, feeling that need for excessive admiration, believing that you're special, being they're super consumed or preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, and beauty. That grandiose sense of importance, in alignment with, wanting to be special, wanting to be a talented person. So yes. So those would be the telltale signs. So if you identify with 5 out of 9 of those, then the answer would be yes.
Okay. And we had touched on this a little bit, but let's say someone's watching and they think, "Oh my gosh, I think the person in the other room is definitely a narcissist."
Mhm.
What would be first steps for them?
I mean, if that's something that you think, and that comes up a lot, right? Like, oh my God, that's my boss, or oh my God, that's this girl in my friend group, or whatever. And that's totally real, and that totally happens. I think that's something that you may just want to kind of keep to yourself and act accordingly, right? And so I think if you feel like someone is exploitative, or they lack empathy, or you've noticed that they just sort of crave power and control, or they're very manipulative, you want to act accordingly, right? And you sort of just want to navigate that relationship, being detached. You can be polite, you can be hospitable, but you don't try to get too close to that person, right? You certainly don't want to, as enticing as it may be, you don't want to go up and say, you know what, I think you're a narc, you know, because that's guaranteed to piss somebody off, right? But you could just sort of act accordingly and just, keep yourself at an arm's length distance as much as possible, I think is the proper way to navigate that.
So if is it usually men or usually women, or is it equally distributed, being a narcissist?
I think, more men get attention for doing it, or for being narcissistic. But I think women are. I don't think women are too far behind. Women. Men are more likely to be aggressive, physically, sexually, financially, digitally aggressive, right? And when I say digitally, I mean like. Social media and things like that. Women are more likely to be relationally aggressive. So we're more likely to cluster up, talk junk, gossip, ice you out, be mean girls, right? So that's women are we're kind of neck and neck, or maybe a little bit one up on men in terms of relational aggression. But I think right now, the way the stats have it, I think men are sort of out, that outnumber women in that area.
All right. So what someone's sitting there and they think, "Oh my gosh, I've been married to this person for a while. Things have been going pretty poorly." And I'm
Hmm.
listening to you thinking, "Maybe this is why." Um,
Hmm.
how do they should they diagnose them on their own, or what should they do?
I mean, again, I think if you're listening to this podcast and you kind of like, I think that's them. I think you could definitely do that. But again, I would keep that to yourself. And because it depends on what everybody else has got going on at home. Because my situation, your situation, everybody's situation is going to be different, right? Because there's some people that are married to someone that's extremely violent, extremely calculating, or extremely retaliatory, right? You say something or do something and they view it as disrespectful, they're going to get you back, they're going to lash out, or they're going to act up in some way that can be harmful to you or your children. So I think everyone has to do what's best for them in their home. There are some people that can tell their spouse and they'll be spat or whatever, but others of you, I think it's something that you have to know for yourself. And I think the other thing is like, what do you want to do about it? Let's just say like if you're listening to this and every bullet hits. What do you want to do about it? Because there are some people that like, yeah, I know that there's some pathology there with my spouse, but um, we're we're in too deep as far as like finances and stuff, so I'm not going anywhere. Right? So we've got too much financial ties. We've got years worth of stuff, so I'm not going anywhere. So I think you have to weigh the pros and cons and really sit with what you're going to do about it. You can try to encourage your person to go to therapy, or you can try to, you have to do what's best for your home. But definitely, I think it's good if you go to therapy and start talking with a person that's very objective, and can maybe give you some feedback and guidance.
Okay. Is it learned or is it genetic?
I think it can be a combination of both. You and I talked about that earlier. Yeah. So people with antisocial personality are no, narcissistic by default. Absolutely. Antisocial is kind of a different area. But yes, I think it's a combination of both. So I think I shared with you earlier that I think it can be, most likely people that have a narcissistic parent, if a narcissistic parent has children, or two narcissistic parents get together, more than likely you are going to have some children that resemble that narcissistic parent or pick up some of those narcissistic traits, and oftentimes you do. You may have one child that's very empathetic, and other narcissistic children. I also think that children learn a lot from modeling of parents. So maybe if they weren't born with that narcissistic trait, I think by years of having their parents be their role models and model that behavior towards each other, I do think that they learn that from parenting. It can also develop, I've also seen it develop by uh, experiences in growing up. So a lot of times, children will learn that, or narcissism will come out of what they call habituation behaviors in parenting. So if you have a parent that is extremely authoritarian, right? You have a parent that's extremely abusive, right? And they, let's say, they physically discipline a child and you have to look at that, because a child, after a certain amount of time, they will just sort of absorb the discipline, and that discipline doesn't even phase them anymore. So they kind of acclimate to pain, discipline, and cruelty, right? And then they start to take that on as a way of life, right? And so those styles of parenting, those styles of treatment, then become internalized as a way of life.
Wow. Now I'd watched something on psychopaths, because yeah, that's what we do, right? We just research all kinds of things. And they were right? And like a documentary thing. And they were saying that you could, on an MRI, you could see a part of the brain that was actually different in a psychopath, as well as pathological liar. There was very similar thing, or physiological signs. Is that the case with narcissism?
They say that there's a lot of conflict around that, especially when it comes to the empathy component. And the latest research that I've read is that narcissists are able to feel empathy, they just don't want to. And they looked at studies and where they were showing, I think it was a group of boys, like some movie or something, like a sappy movie, and boys or young men, I should say, that had components of that disorder versus ones that didn't, to see which areas of the brain that light up. And both areas in both boys do light up, but narcissists don't respond physiologically. So heart rate and everything else didn't respond the same way. However, the brain is able to register that. So there's some conflict around empathy in particular.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, because there is someone in my family that is absolutely. And you had said earlier when we were talking not to call them out. I did call them out. And I said, because that, yeah. But the things you're saying, I mean, it absolutely, but yeah, saying it does not help. They do not want to
Yeah.
hear about it.
they don't want to hear about it. But I think too, I think and that's why, nowadays too, it's so easy for narcissists to kind of slip through society as a normal person, because they're very easily able to mirror, right? They're able to mirror empathy and other emotions, right? And that's the dangerous things about a psychopath, is like they can present as like a normal person, and oftentimes they do for the longest time. And so that's how they're able to do that, is because they're able to mimic and do certain things, if you will. Yeah, very coy, very cunning.
Yeah, it's interesting, and they can really
Mhm.
get away with things for a really long time. So,
Absolutely.
all right, so Jay has questions. Um,
So can the behaviors involved in narcissistic personality disorders lessen with the use of CBT or DBT? If so, which one would be most effective? So you're talking about cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy, and I think I was talking to Jen about this earlier on the last show. So yes, we can work on certain behaviors such as impulse control, right? And thinking through certain actions before you impulsively act on them, because there are a lot of narcissists who act on things impulsively without um, worrying about the consequences, or how they're going to think about with how those things are going to affect other people. And a lot of times we did work in the correctional setting. We did use DBT as well as CBT, and you can use both of those interchangeably. I will say with DBT, uh, I think both of them are effective, but I think you also have to know the limitations of who you're working with, right? And I think you also have to be realistic, and that personality component is always going to be there. Whereas with sociopaths, a lot of sociopaths age out of sociopathy in their later 40s, or they age out of certain characteristics. The same is not true for narcissism and borderline. That's kind of like a lifelong trait. So, yes, behaviors can lessen. It also depends on the severity on which they are at the spectrum. You have some people that are so extreme in the personality disorder, you cannot do anything with them. A good example of this would be someone who is a sadist. And in my opinion, that's probably one of the most scariest people to work with. A sadist would be like Hannibal Lecter. If you know the character Hannibal Lecter from Silence of the Lambs, and I've seen people even scarier than that. There are certain people that, like, they need to be at a supermax, and there's nothing that you can do for those types of folks because they're just so extreme. There's also people that are so extreme that they don't care about the consequences, right? And so, what does that look like? What do I mean when I say that? There are people that want what they want, and they will go to any extreme to get it. So that means that they will fake anything. They will cause severe harm to themselves in order to get what they want. So I've seen people that, like, for example, in a correctional setting, one of the things that a lot of inmates want is a single cell, right? And it's only one of two ways that you're going to get a single cell. One, you're going to kill somebody, or there's going to be something else that's so extreme in order for you to get it, because no one's getting it, right? But I've seen people go to the extreme of, like, self mutilation, where it's like cutting off limbs and things like that. Whereas most people, even though they're, narcissistic, they're not. I'm not going to do all that, right? I'm gonna complain, and I'm gonna make it hell for everybody else. But I'm not gonna cut off my arm.
right.
I'm not gonna do that. But there are some people that are like, I've got nothing to lose. So you know what? Here we go, and then I'm going to sue everybody. So there are people that are just willing to go through that length to get what they want. And so those, to me, those two are the most dangerous types of people.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So somebody's asking because we didn't. I was going to ask and I forgot. CBT and DBT. So can you tell a little bit about what those things mean?
Yeah, so cognitive behavioral therapy was, created by Aaron Beck. And cognitive behavioral therapy is basically learning to shape your thoughts, which will then shape your behavior. So if you are a negative thinker, then chances are your behavior is also going to be a manifestation, right? You're going to have negative behavior that kind of correlates that. But if we can reshape, reframe your thoughts to not be catastrophic, to not be all or nothing, black or white, if we can reframe them to think more positively and to think more about how other people might be affected, then you may act more positively. With DBT, created by Marsha Linehan, DBT is also, I think, to me, it's also a component of CBT because she uses a lot of the CBT framework, but she's also focusing on the interpersonal relationship component. I think that's the biggest piece with CBT is you're looking at how you show up in relationships and you're modifying your behavior to show up more for yourself so that again you're not all or nothing, you're not so extreme and polarizing, both with yourself and for the people that you show up for. And DBT is very popular for folks with borderline personality disorder, and antisocial and narcissism as well as histrionic, any of the personality disorders really, with the exception of schizoid. Hmm.
That's interesting. Yeah, I had
Yeah,
never heard of DBT. So
yeah.
yeah, so Lena's from another country, and so she was saying she is foreigner here. I don't know all the abbreviations. So there we go. Yeah. So,
Aw.
yeah, and we've got different things too that we talk about, I
Yeah,
think, than they do. So, that's interesting. Does anyone
yeah.
have any questions about all the things? Well, let's take a pause, and you can tell everybody if they're interested where they could find you because you are a counselor, but you also do some coaching. So if someone is dealing with some kind of relationship thing, or do you also deal with people who just need help for themselves too?
Yes, yeah. So I work with a lot of folks. And so you can find me on drnataliejones.com. That's DrNatalieJones.com. And you can find me there. You can also find me via my podcast, A Date with Darkness, or datewithdarkness.com. I do, just like you said, Jen, I'll be doing coaching. I will also be doing a workshop in September. So I'll be doing a workshop on down low men in September. So two workshops on living with men who are on the down low. And if you are also a man who is on the down low and you are harming your partner by being on the down low. So those are two workshops that I will be doing coming up this year.
Very cool. Okay, so what does that mean
Yeah.
on the down low? What does that mean?
Oh, you don't know? Okay.
No.
So, on my show, A Day with Darkness, as you know, I talk all about narcissism and narcissistic personality and healing from abuse. But on the down low, it's usually it describes a subset of African American culture, but you can also apply it to any culture really, where you have men who identify themselves as heterosexual and they're married, a lot of times with children. However, behind closed doors, they're really living a gay lifestyle and they're not telling their partner about it. And that has garnered a lot of attention recently. The state of South Carolina has made news for having 15,000 people diagnosed with HIV very recently. So the numbers of HIV and things like that are going up, where you have these men that are oftentimes psychologically and emotionally abusive to the women that they're married to and secretly hate them. But they are being dishonest about living a gay lifestyle without telling their wives, and will bring their wives home consequences from their lifestyles.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, now I've learned something new today. All right. So, and then later he says demographics may be the wrong word, but is it an American thing? Is it all over the world? Are there certain like groups that, yeah.
I do think it's a worldwide thing. Yeah, so a worldwide thing. I think certain cultures though, um, it depends on the culture. I think American culture is a very individualistic society, but we're also a very male centered society, right? In terms of like males are still running a lot of things, right? And I think certain cultures too, right? So, for example, maybe Middle Eastern cultures where women still have to ask for permission, women are still expected to be modest. I still think any culture where people are allowed, certain groups of people are allowed to be in power, and they get to designate rules. There's no such thing as egalitarianism. I think that is where you're going to be likely to find narcissism. You're also going to be, I think you're also going to be more apt to find narcissism in cultures where there is violence. You're going to be able to find it in cultures where uh, emotions aren't encouraged. So positive emotions, attachment, and things like that are encouraged. So when you think about like those old psychology studies, like babies in Romania, where they had all those babies in that institution and didn't give them any sort of they never held them, right, or they never acknowledged them except to like feed them. So if they grow up in those cold, emotionally cold, distant, and stoic upbringing, I think you're going to have personality traits from that. Yeah.
So people who are raised by parents who maybe didn't really want them would have a higher likelihood of that as well then,
I
maybe.
definitely think that parents that don't want them, parents that exhibit cruelty and punishment, they're going to typically have things like that. Absolutely, extreme cruelty and punishment, especially.
All right. Does anybody have any questions? Dave, do you have any questions? I feel like you may have questions. I can't see him though. He's hiding down there. Yeah. So because I have a whole list of questions.
Oh,
So
okay, okay.
can somebody become a narcissist later in life? Or does it usually start earlier?
Typically, in my experience, you tend to see it by adolescence. Um, is there a pill that helps? I like that one. Unfortunately, not for not for the narcissistic traits. We are a pill nation. Is there a pill that helps? I like that one. I haven't gotten that one yet. Unfortunately, not. You typically tend to see personality traits before the age of 18. So a lot of times you'll see it by adolescence. And then, in my experience, once things set in adolescence, it's really hard to walk that back. So once you start seeing those traits, because personality is shaped and formed usually by a child by that time, and so once you see that, even if children get treatment, those personality traits are hard set. In terms of we're a pill nation, is there a pill that helps? No, because personality is who we are when the lights are off and no one's home, right? When no one's watching, that's just who we are. And unfortunately, it's not like depression or anxiety where we can take symptoms to help manage that, manage our characterological traits. So that's usually a hard set. That's our values. That's the code in which we live life by. So we actually start to see people as objects or personal possessions, and we start to see things as for our taking. Yeah.
All right. So, American courts. Okay. What do you mean affect sentencing? Do you know? Okay. Does narcissism affect sentencing in a positive or negative way? Okay. I don't. know what you mean by that. Do you mean for the person?
Prison sentencing.
Yeah, I think that's what he's talking about.
Well, so not in terms of punishment typically. I mean, the American courts, that's a whole different ball game. And a lot of times when people have to go to court for sentencing, there's a lot of things that judges take into account: prior criminal history, person's demographic background in a lot of areas.
Prison
Is it
sentence.
yeah, so they're kind of looking at that, and they don't necessarily have a diagnosis sometimes when they go to prison, right? Because sometimes it could just be a person that commits their first crime, things like that. Is it a reason for sympathy or aggravator? If you're talking about a diagnosis of narcissistic personality, it is certainly not a reason for sympathy. In my opinion, there's a lot of different opinions about it. There are people that look at narcissistic personality disorder as a mental illness. I do not. And I do not because a narcissist is typically very self aware. They just don't care about the consequences. And a lot of times, if they want to, they can control things if they want to, but it just comes down to, I don't want to, and I feel like I want something, and I feel like I'm better than you, and I deserve to have it regardless of the consequence. So I don't think, and there's people that have different schools of opinion about this. I don't think a characterological disorder is a mental health disorder because a person knows right from wrong, and they're able to manage that if they want to. Yeah. So I read that physical brain trauma can cause alterations in personality. Yes, that is true. I have. It's rare that that happens, but yes, it does happen. Like for example, in my career, I've maybe worked with I think maybe one person that has seizure disorder that brought on personality disorder.
Oh, wow.
So literally, they would have any sort of brain changes and alterations, and you could like actually physically see it happening, in the psych ward, and that is very rare that that happens. And I've been doing that since I've been working with people since 2007. So I've only seen one instance of that. It can happen. Um, let's see. Do you ever get asked about it for that? That the mental disorder connection? I'm not sure what that question is asking about
Let's see.
American courts. Um, yeah,
Like,
anything you can.
if she came on as a specialist and they didn't have as much sentencing because of it, is that the question? I don't know. So American courts, if you can, yeah. Ooh, is there something you can scan like blood work or brain scan?
Yeah, so there is. I was talking with Miss Jen about that earlier. So there have been studies on like the amygdala and things like that in certain areas of the brain to see, like, with people that do not have narcissistic personality versus those, to see how different areas of the brain, such as the amygdala, the hippocampus, and other areas of the brain, do light up. In terms of blood work, no. In terms of diagnostic brain scans, I don't know if that's a thing, like a diagnostic brain scan. And it's also probably, even if it was a thing, it probably would not, um, they probably wouldn't use it because it's a more expensive way to go, and it's not really necessary diagnostically for most people, for a clinician to be able to diagnose that. Um, yes. Let's see.
Oh,
I
no,
thought,
expert
yeah, go ahead.
testimony. Yeah, that's what he's talking about. Would it affect the court well, yeah, if you want to just tell about expert testimony, what's that like?
So that's a very interesting that's a very interesting part of my career that I've started to take on more of that. It's again, it's working with attorneys. It's testifying about mental illnesses and how a mental illness or a relationship dynamic can impact a person, whether a person has committed a crime, what has what affected what caused them to do that, right? Was depression a factor? Was PTSD a factor? Those would be some of the things that I'm asked about, right? Or relationship dynamics, right? Did a person commit a crime, or did they do certain things because they were abused? Did something that a person experienced in a particular job or a particular setting cause their mental health issue or their mental duress? And so it's being able to provide like factual information based off of my education and be able to argue that, right? Being able to discuss that, educate people about that, and argue that. Um, Sometimes American court doesn't know how to ask questions, ignore
That's funny. So, what are some common misconceptions about narcissism?
Not everybody's a narcissist, but it's becoming a buzzword. Even narcissists think that everybody's a narcissist, right? So a lot of times narcissists also believe um, that they are being abused, right? And so you have to be really good diagnostician, because a lot of times they're also complaining that they are being victimized or being hurt in some way by other people, right? So you're not the only one, and so that's the thing. Um, Leave me alone. So yeah, so if you have a boss, I think I was talking to Jen about this earlier. Kind of like if you have a boss who has it, and I've had many bosses who've had it, because you can't always get away from a person that has a narcissist. One, I think you have to, I think the first thing, if you have a boss who has it, you have to think about what your job means to you, right? If your job is one that is, you already know you're not going to stay there for very long. I'm not going to stay here very long. This is a short-term job, 6 months. I'm just here to get a check and I'm out. I think that's the first thing, right? So I think how you view your job will then determine your behavior. So if it's a short-term job, first of all, me personally, I would not invest too much energy at that job. Therefore, I would not invest too much energy into my boss, right? If you can help it, you could just be um, very polite, very superficial. Hey, how's it going? And keep it pushing and try to have as little interaction with that boss as possible. There are some people that don't have that luxury, and I call it a luxury because there are some people, unfortunately, if you're anything like myself, if you have a boss, if you had a boss, I don't, unfortunately, I'm my own boss now, or fortunately, I'm my own boss now, but if you had a boss that's narcissistic and that boss targets you, right? Because that's oftentimes a lot of what happens a lot. I would be very meticulous about documenting, taking notes, reporting things. If you can report, if you have a reputable HR or a boss above that boss. So I would be very meticulous about reporting that. Again, if you're invested in that job. Otherwise, I would spend quite a bit more time looking for elsewhere to go and be investing my energy elsewhere. Make sure you have a good life outside of work. Try to have friends, try to have hobbies, other things that you can do outside of work to decompress, but be looking for a way out of there. Make notes. Always take notes in like a notepad or another device outside of your work computer. So don't take notes on your work computer, right? Because one, they have the option to take all of that stuff back and erase it, right? Because it's company property. But two, you want to have a way to access all of that stuff. So, always make notes, hire an attorney if you need to, if it ever gets to that point. Yeah.
So here's a weird question. Are there any benefits to having a relationship with a narcissist?
I mean, there can be, and there are people, and you and I were talking about this earlier too, right? Like when you're married to one, right? Some people have to weigh the pros and cons, and some people may choose to stay married because, listen, I have perks, right? This person may not be a good person to deal with, but they're financially stable. We have kids together. We may have businesses together, so we may have my life may be provided for, or there may be certain benefits to everyone has to weigh that for themselves. And there are, and I've worked with a lot of well-to-do people, celebrities, and things like that, even that it's like, what, I have so much more tied up into this person. It's not easy for me to walk away because I would lose a lot more in terms of my lifestyle. And so, everyone has to sort of weigh that out. Lifestyle, business, it may be other advantages, maybe families and things like that. So culturally, when you start looking at other cultures outside of the U.S., they believe in arranged marriages. So you can't just walk away because we're married as a family. We're not just married to a spouse, we're married as a family, right? And so it might be if you try to walk away from that, you now have the wrath of that entire family unit. And so those things can get very serious. So it's to each their own with that one, yeah. Hmm.
All right. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I wouldn't really have thought about that, but I guess that's true. So,
Hmm.
wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
feel like
sometimes
sanity,
anyway,
would
yeah,
be
it's a
more
business.
important, but I think sometimes you don't realize maybe either until
Yeah.
it's been a while or something kind of triggers it
Mhm,
because yeah.
mhm,
What
yeah,
does social media play a role in fostering narcissistic behavior, do you think?
absolutely, absolutely. Social media is like a third party popularity contest. You've seen that now since the invention of selfies and things like that. That's a big ego boost for people. People take you don't know how seriously people take likes, comments, and smileys, right? Like a smiley can make or break your day at work in a work email. If you don't send a smiley at the end of a work email, that can literally piss people off. If I send a smiley to you and you don't send one back, I've literally had people say that to me, like, what is wrong with you? You did not send me a smiley back. Yeah, do you not
Wow.
like me? People get in their feelings about emojis. People get in their feelings if you saw my picture or my post and you didn't like it. And there are people who have done things for the validation of social media. You've got people that are modeling clothes. You've got people that are taking off their clothes. You've got people who have committed crimes on social media now. Yeah, the filters, right? The filters, right? 90 Day Fiance, right, was built off of like social media filters, right? And if we laugh about
Really?
it, but like, yeah, those people who date other people in foreign countries
Yeah.
and
Oh,
then
no, I watched that.
they show up and they don't look anything like they looked on social media because they use this doggone Snapchat filters, and then they show up and they're like 300 pounds. And it's like, who are you? You are not that person I've been chatting with this big Snapchat filter.
Right?
There were so many people on that show that, they built shows off of that. So yeah, definitely social media
Wow.
plays a part into that, but also too, not just social media, but dating apps. Dating apps is probably a bigger thing, right? Because
Yeah.
that dating apps are a narcissist playground. You can definitely hide your identity. You can hide being married, right? People like to post those pictures of them working out, half naked, things like that. And they change their name and they just develop a whole new identity. And narcissists live two, three, four, five double lives. You know what I'm saying? So it's very easy for them to hide, in dating apps. So social media definitely plays a part in terms of false identity and also ego boosting. But yeah, for sure, social media. I think social media has helped things like escalate tremendously, especially among the younger generation that sort of feeds into that. Like that's everything for young people now is like social media. Yeah. Yeah, meeting the bar. People don't like meeting in person now. They like social media, right? And yeah, so
So
but
that's how
yeah.
Dave and I met. I asked him to dance actually, and then yeah. And then we were never apart except for military stuff for our kids, except overnight, like,
Yeah,
obviously, but, my kids,
yeah,
but, yeah, that's so
yeah.
funny. So let's say, someone close to you is in a relationship with a narcissist, how can you support them? Do you tell them, like, "Hey, I think that person's a narcissist," or what is the best thing to do?
I think it depends on several things, right? I think it depends on you and that person's relationship, right? So if you're good enough friends with them or good enough family, if you have a good family relationship, if you have a good rapport, and I also think it depends on that person's relationship with the narcissist, right? And you can certainly tell them that, but if they are so into that person, because sometimes you have people that you just want to tell them so bad, but listen, I'm in love. I'm on cloud nine. Whatever else you guys are talking about, I don't want to hear that because I feel like you're being a negative Nancy and I feel like you're just trying to shit on my relationship parade, right? What is that? What is that Teresa Giudice used to say on the Real House? You're trying to burst my love bubble, right? So you have people that like they'll kind of look at it depending on what level of love bombing they're at, right? They don't want to hear it. And then you have people that do want to hear it, maybe, but they're not going to do anything about it, right? So you have to sort of vet whether or not it's in your best interest, and you also have to be able to like say it and leave it at the table and not expect anything from them, right? Because there's a lot of times when we tell people something and we just want them to get out, right? Oh, you're being abused. I just want you to get out. So you can't really have that expectation because there are some people that you will tell them stuff, but they're not going anywhere, and you don't want to get so caught up in the result that it starts to affect your friendship. You know what I'm saying? So that's the other thing. So you have to weigh in certain things.
It's so hard because I have a
Yeah,
couple friends who are in situations like that, and I just
yeah.
wanna fix it, and you can't fix it.
Yeah, you cannot fix that. And there are people that just like they don't want to be saved, right? Like I don't want to be saved, like I don't want to hear it. There are people that will do all that and say that they want to be saved, and guess what? They're going right back.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going right back in a week or two. You've done all this to try to help people, and the other thing I will also say that too is like you want to also be able to assess the level of danger because that's another thing that people have to think about because if that person is dangerous and you sort of insert yourself because you're trying to rescue and help someone, make sure you don't get yourself too caught up because you can also get caught up in the crossfire and get hurt. There's a lot of there to me there's a lot of pathology that goes around and people get caught up in that backlash trying to be a good person, trying to help their friend. I was watching a show a little while ago. A woman went to help her friend. Her friend was getting caught up with her husband is acting like a crazy pants, and not to make this a woman man thing,
Yeah.
but she went to go rescue her friend and help her friend pack her stuff. This woman is pregnant. Next thing you know, this man is kicking her in her stomach, right? And this friend stayed with that man and she found out what time it was. Like, she's like, I did all of that to come over there and help you and put myself in risk, and you stayed. So you got to be thinking like you can go over and help someone and do all this, and they can turn around and go back, and you can't be invested in the so overly invested in the outcome that you're willing to risk certain things. So make sure you're boundaried, make sure you're in a position to kind of do certain things and stay safe, but not too overly invested.
All right, and we have one more question, and then it's 8, and American Courts is about to start going live, I think. So we'll close down. But yeah, this is so incredible. You're just a fountain of gold over here. I love it. So Plaza, I don't know. Do you think that that's narcissism? I don't know.
I think no, not necessarily. There's different reasons people have plastic surgery. I think there are people who can go overboard with plastic surgery, and I think with people who go overboard, that can be body dysmorphia. And I definitely do think there are a lot of people who are narcissistic who have body dysmorphia, right? Which means that they feel like their body is never good enough, or there's always something that needs to be fixed. So you have those people that are spending billions of dollars on the plastic surgery industry, but I think that's more of body dysmorphia and things like that. But there also can be a narcissism component to it, as well as I think the physician who is doing that work also has a narcissistic component to them. And I've had plastic surgery. I've had it done 3 times. I have a lazy eye, and so I've had it done. But true story, I had a doctor, plastic surgeon, Dr. Jonathan Christenberry, who lost everything because of his narcissism. He started stalking the woman that worked for him and just got caught up with doing things, surgeries under the influence, lots of things.
Wow.
And that got the better of him. And unfortunately, he lost a lot of things. But yeah, I think the doctors that are doing the work, in some cases, not all the time, but a lot of times, people who continue to do that, absolutely.
Well, I'm from LA, and everyone out there has that's one of the reasons I wanted to
Yeah,
get out of there, because I had daughters that
yeah,
it was a common 16th birthday
yeah.
present. It was crazy. So uh,
hmm
yeah. But anyway, well, thank you so much. Yeah, this has been really incredible, and I appreciate it. I'm going to ask one last
Yeah,
question. If you all have to go,
sure.
you can catch it later. So a lot of people here watch court, and one of the questions that keeps coming up is, you see these men in court, they're there for domestic assault, and the people they've assaulted are in court. They're there driving them home and bringing them back. Why? That's the question, is
Um,
why?
I mean, I think we've kind of been talking about it. I think a lot of people, when you're caught up in a domestic violence relationship, a violent relationship, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be physically. It could be emotionally. It could be psychologically. It could be financially, right? These people that they're caught up with are master manipulators. I mean, I just spent a few minutes talking to you about how teachers are willing to risk it all. You have psychologists, you have other officers, people that are willing to risk it all for a person behind bars who doesn't have a job, who can't provide them anything. They can't provide any sort of stability. Like, what are you thinking, right? But I think you have people that you have people from all different walks of life that crave validation. You have people that maybe have been groomed since childhood, or been preyed upon or abused since childhood. You have people where their niceness has been taken advantage of. You have people that are lonely. You have people that are stuck in a perpetual state of grief because they've lost people in their lives, and sort of even though they know someone's bad for them, this is the person that's physically there, right? And so they're sort of clinging to hope. They've been told all kinds of things. They could be fearful. They could be, oh, this is my child's father. I want my children to have a father, right? Or I want to work it out. I don't want women too. I think women are susceptible to this more than men because women are always conditioned, especially in America. We were always conditioned from birth to, we're conditioned to be wives and mothers right from jump, most of us. So we're hardwired to keep family together, to be mothers for the most of us. There are some exceptions, but very few, right? And so I think, sometimes we can do things to our own detriment. And it's not always just women, so I don't want to put that out there. But I think a lot of it has to do with conditioning, loss, people wanting love. I think, too, especially for the younger generation, is what people see on TV. I mean, those trash movies and music videos that we saw from the 80s, right? The 80s was a very rape based culture, right? You've seen Revenge of the Nerds where this guy raped this girl and oh my god, she loved it and they fell in love. I mean, so you see that those sort of themes and things like that happening a lot. So I think a lot of it too has to do with movies, lyrics and the music, and also social media influences. Hmm.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for explaining that. That's something that people keep
Yeah.
asking. Thank you for spending all this time with us. If
Yeah.
you missed part of this and you want to see it, you can obviously see the rest, but it's also going to be a podcast episode where it's just the two of us talking. Well, mostly I've got Dr. Jones talking because she's the expert, and she says a few things that we haven't talked about in this one. It's going to be amazing. So I'll share
Yeah.
it with you when it comes out. And thank you again. You are phenomenal. And
All right.
Dave
Thank
wants me
you.
to ask you, oh my goodness, we have to ask. Grilled cheese, if you're cooking it, what do you cook it in, mayo or butter?
Butter, man. I'm from the South. It's butter all the way. I haven't tried that mayo. I've seen that on TikTok, and I'm like, I don't know about that, but butter all the time.
There
Yeah,
we go.
butter, sourdough, and that good old Kraft sliced cheese. Oh yeah.
There we go. All right, we're ending on that. Bye, everybody. Love you all. See you soon.